If you're anything like me, you may have felt a bit puzzled by the recent Epstein email dump.
Larry Summers served as Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary, and in Barack Obama's administration, these new emails revealed comments that Summers made as he also sought out dating advice from Jeffrey Epstein.
Why were so many powerful people seemingly in a close, casual relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? It doesn't seem like they were all in on a child SA ring, so what's going on here? Well, I did a lot of digging through a lot of email chains to try to answer one fundamental question. What does the life of Jeffrey Epstein seem to tell us about the link between power, wealth, and utter depravity? And more importantly, what do we do about it? After spending hours sifting through the documents in the House Oversight Committee data dump, I found something. It's an article that I don't believe was ever published, but my guess is that it was written by Michael Wolff, although there's no name associated with it. And inside this article, there's a really interesting quote. It is a curious attribute of his character that, other than perhaps being more circumspect about which legal advice to follow, Epstein would have done little differently. When I suggested recently to Epstein that one obvious way to blunt the animus bearing down on him would be to get married, he said he'd rather go back to jail. In order to understand why so many powerful people were so drawn to Jeffrey Epstein, I think we really need to understand who he was and what he stood for. And it's quotes like this one that I think give us a really good glimpse into where his priorities were. The more I looked into his emails and his life and his history, I started to see a pattern. This was a man who was really obsessed with something very simple, almost obvious. I believe that what made Jeffrey Epstein who he was at his core was an insatiable drive toward a type of freedom that you or I wouldn't even recognize. An unfettered, predatory freedom that he worked every single day of his life to see come to fruition. From the very beginning, Jeffrey Epstein seemed to have a theory about how to achieve his very perverted notion of freedom. Identify cages and walk out of them. Take, for example, the concept of college. Back in the 70s, when Jeffrey Epstein went to college, it was unheard of to think you could just drop out of college and land some really successful job anyway. But that's exactly what Jeffrey Epstein did, because when he looked at college, he didn't see a necessary evil in order to achieve success in life. He saw a cage, a societal construct, an expectation that was unnecessary for someone like him. He had an alternate plan instead: forego the cage by figuring out who to use, what lever to pull, and how to not get caught. And it worked. He circumvented the societal tie-downs of something as trivial as being qualified for a job and leapfrogged from one opportunity to the next, eventually landing him on Wall Street. And all of this was in service of the thing he knew he needed in order to be a truly free man: money. But where your average man might think that landing it on Wall Street means they made it, Jeffrey Epstein was really just getting started at this point in his career, because right as he was getting cozy with his fancy job, he realized there was another cage right around the corner, working for the man. In order to really be free, someone like Jeffrey Epstein could not handle the humiliation of things like having a boss, having deadlines, being held accountable. No, he needed a way to earn money with no strings attached. Enter the criminal world. One thing he learned from Wall Street was that rich people are crazy about their money. So he set up shop as some kind of money bounty hunter, tracking down embezzled funds, but then turned around and made a buck off of the embezzlers, helping them better hide their money. I can imagine at this point in his life, Jeffrey Epstein probably thought he made it, finally, a really free man. But he overreached a bit, allegedly, as the co-architect of a Ponzi scheme, and as he saw his alleged co-conspirators all going away to prison, I think he had a bit of a come-to-Jesus moment, realizing, there's a cage involved in criminal activity as well. Legal consequences. And if we've learned anything about Epstein at this point, we know he's not just going to lay down and take that type of risk. No. He's the kind of person who is going to obsessively pursue total, utter, unfettered, predatory freedom, no matter what he has to do next. Enter his greatest scheme yet. I believe that the version of Jeffrey Epstein that we all are familiar with was the result of all these steps that came before it. I think he realized it wasn't enough to just have no morals. It wasn't enough to just have unlimited money. He also needed insulation. Insulation from any consequences at all. That's really the only way you can be the type of free that he wanted to be. The type of free that can do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and never have to face consequences. And this is where I think he had a big realization. He had spent his whole adult life around wealthy people. He had gotten to know them, understand how they think, what they care about, and most importantly, what their vulnerabilities were. Jeffrey Epstein had something that every rich, successful, powerful person can't just purchase with their wealth or create with their influence. No, most rich, powerful, successful people cannot simply do the things they might want to do. Unlike Jeffrey Epstein, they have reputations to uphold. They have people who will be disappointed in them, who will be angry at them, who will hold them to account, who will punish them. They will be brought down from their status if certain kinds of things ever got out, which makes them very risky. As we're looking to answer this question of how so many powerful people were so drawn to Jeffrey Epstein, I think the answer is pretty simple. Jeffrey Epstein provided the permission they needed to take by force the things that they believed they were entitled to by providing them the secrecy needed to ensure they would get away with it. We might discover more evidence in the future that proves me wrong, but it is my opinion that I do not believe that Jeffrey Epstein had some kind of grand vision or agenda that he was trying to achieve outside of that unfettered, predatory freedom that he was obsessed with. I think that he traded a taste of that kind of unfettered, predatory freedom to people in exchange for another layer of insulation from consequences for himself. And he followed the breadcrumbs of the kinds of things that people who are powerful tend to want onto a global scale. He was a willing vessel. He knew how to use people, and he also knew how to give them the thing that they needed the most: total secrecy. When looked at through this light, even the Larry Summers emails start to make sense. Larry Summers was the previous president of Harvard University. He has recently been a faculty member up until now that he's being investigated for being in the Epstein files. And a lot of people have wondered why he would pick Epstein of all people to befriend and seemingly just have kind of a casual relationship with. I think it's pretty obvious, because in the email exchange, it's pretty clear that Larry Summers isn't looking for just merely dating advice from Jeffrey Epstein. He seems to be looking for permission and even mentorship on how to leverage his position of power to take advantage of a relationship with a person who has less power than him. It seems like, allegedly, he might have had an interest in learning the predatory freedom ways of Jeffrey Epstein. And the grand irony in all of this is that Jeffrey Epstein failed. He never avoided those cages. He just walked right into different ones. Sure, he didn't have a public reputation to uphold, but he certainly had a reputation within the circles that mattered to him that he did need to uphold. And sure, he didn't have a boss holding him accountable, but he was being held accountable by some of the most powerful, influential, wealthy, elite people in the whole world. He never escaped consequences, he just kicked them down the road. And the ongoing investigation, including the most recent email dumps, prove that he failed at delivering at the most basic product that he promised, which was secrecy, and now is bringing down so many others in his wake. And the part that I find most pathetic of his entire life story is the fact that he even failed at the one and only goal he was aiming for his entire life, which was freedom. He literally died in a cage. I believe that there is a lesson to be learned from Jeffrey Epstein's story, one that transcends the shadowy cabal of elites. I believe that a lot of our most insidious social problems come from people who have this perverted sense of freedom that is unfettered, that is predatory in nature. But if there's one thing that this email data dump shows us, it's that those people are unlikely to avoid consequences. They're unlikely to be the smartest people in the room like Jeffrey Epstein thought he was. They're much more likely to fail because the things that happen in the dark tend to have a way of coming into the light.